as such, we're just going to have a generally good old time with it, and we're going to mock these top-end players from around the world for being terrible. Hello, ballers and a bro fist to you all! Welcome to the Daily Preach, where today we talk about being good at the game. Workshop time, baby! It's Wednesday, which means it's the workshop. That means we're going to be looking at the new Siege of Orgrimmar bosses, the final raid of our expansion. This is what Mists of Pandaria has been building towards. This is what it's all about. This is what we've been waiting for. A lot to live up to, the Siege of Orgrimmar has a lot to live up to. One, the previous raid tiers have been pretty good. It's actually been one of the best raiding expansions for a long time. There has been no raid instance that people have gone, God, that sucks. That's terrible, man. I fucking hate this shit. What are you doing, Blizz? What are you doing? That hasn't happened at all in Mists of Pandaria. It also didn't really happen in Cataclysm. Until Mother of fucking God. Until that Dragon Soul. Until that Dragon Soul, man. Until the Dragon Soul showed its ugly face and we were like, what the hell happened to our game, man? What are you doing? What are you doing? So, Siege of Orgrimmar has a lot to live up to. It's got its previous competition. Every single raid has been pretty good. And also, it has to beat the Dragon Soul. We can't have a repeat. What we don't want is WoW to fall into this kind of horrible cycle where the last raid sucks. Nobody wants that, because this is what we've been waiting for. It's the first time we're going to be looking at a major lore character getting his teeth kicked in one form or another, in the form of Garrosh Hellscream. We're going to be kicking him right in the fucking ghoulies, new model and all. I assume he has large, nice, hairy, 3D textured, next-gen testicles, which we are going to be sticking our foot inside, which is going to be cool. So what we decided to do today, this is about as close as I will ever get to doing a WoW boss guide. I don't like WoW boss guides particularly. I used them in the past, never really found them helpful. I didn't. It's all about being in there and experience it. But what we want to do is take a look at how the mechanics are being used. Are things being reused? So you can sort of prepare in your mind how these fights are going to work. There's nothing better than when someone says to you, hey, this boss is like bleh, and you go, oh, I've done that, boss. I could do this shit really easily. What we have got in Siege of Orgrimmar so far is a lot of rehashed mechanics. A lot of them. A lot of mechanics from yesteryear, in fact, going back almost as far as vanilla. In fact, definitely back as far as vanilla. We're going to be looking at the first boss, which is Immersus. We're also going to look at our old friends, the Paragons of the Klaxxi, which is a very interesting fight in terms of it is the biggest ever Dungeon Journal entry, and people were just like, People checking the Dungeon Journal for the Paragons of the Klaxxi were just, this can't be possible. And we're also going to look at what is potentially the most difficult fight inside, which is the Siegebreaker, which is very much like Mimiron. Mimiron is considered to be one of, if not the best ever raid bosses ever designed by Blizzard. Mimiron is, anybody who ever did Firefighter will know exactly how glorious that fight was. Firefighter is it's good. Firefighter was an amazing experience for anybody lucky enough to manage to do that either on progress and eventually get the kill when it was appropriate will understand how good that fight was, how well balanced it was. It was doable, which is always important for a fight that is particularly difficult, and it wasn't based around just raw damage. Such as Muru, I would say, was based around raw damage. Yes, very tightly tuned for raw damage. But his Mimiron had loads and loads of things going on, required immense amounts of teamwork, which I always love to see in a raid. A raid is about teamwork. You're going in with your bestest buds, right? Everybody in your raid is, of course, a best friend forever. And we want to see teamwork. We don't want to see people just going, I do more damages than you do, therefore I is better because I make big numbers. We don't want to see that. We don't want to see that at all. So we're going to look, first of all, we're going to jump straight in. We're going to be looking at Immersus. Immersus is going to be your first boss in the Siege of Orgrimmar. So when your 10-man group or your 25-man rolls into the Siege of Orgrimmar for the first time, or you're going with LFR or Flexi Raid or whatever it is that you do, you're going to encounter Mr. Immersus. Immersus is based on a fight which was, in fact, back in vanilla. As I said earlier, a lot of rehashed mechanics. Immersus is entirely based, pretty much, off a fight back from Courage. A fight which some of you may know as the boss that will not die on your transmog runs. That boss, which caused a lot of controversy at the time. His name is Visidius. Visidius, whatever you want to pronounce it. Mr. Visidius was a huge pain in the ass for the Alliance. In fact, it was the first time in Vanilla, little history lesson for you, it was the first time in Vanilla that the Horde had a distinct advantage over the Alliance. You might find that quite unbelievable, but the Horde-Alliance balance in PvE did not exist in Vanilla, such as class balance didn't exist. Neither did raid balance, and in fact it was the first time ever that Horde had a very large advantage over the Alliance. The Alliance were pissed. The Alliance were very pissed. The forums were in outrage, because of course, if the Alliance is more favourable, there was a lot more Alliance PvE guilds than there were Horde back in Vanilla. You might find that strange considering the dominance of Horde now, but in Vanilla it was in fact almost entirely Alliance. There were lots of Horde guilds of course, but the Alliance were far ahead. And the only reason was because of Poison Cleansing Totem. We miss Poison Cleansing Totem. But the idea with Visidius was simple. Visidius would break into pieces, globules, little pieces of himself that all were representative of his health. The more you killed, by the time they crawled back together to form him again, would reduce his health. And that was it. Other than that, you just had to freeze him. So it wasn't uncommon to see rogues with frost damage weapons and things like that, just to proc frost damage on him. That's all you had to do. It was actually a relatively simple fight, if incredibly difficult to actually kill. Immersus works the same way. Immersus, I would say, so far, is looking extremely easy. But I would also say on Heroic, he's looking extremely difficult, which I think is a good balance. I think that's a very nice balance, is that instantly, as you go in your fresh group, they don't want to intimidate you. You've got to remember, this is a new time for raiding. We're bringing back raiding. We're trying to bring it back. We've got Flexi raiding. We're trying to push people back into raiding and out of the LFR. There's an active effort going on to do that. So your first boss has to be representative of that and be killable. Within reason, has to be killable. So Immersus is, we're going to have a look at a picture. Now I hope we're not going to drop any frames. We've had a nightmare with dropped frames. I also streamed most of today, and I thank everybody who tuned in with me for that, as we played a lot of Brutal Legend and some Gears of War. So we'll jump into here. Our videos today are kindly provided by Mr. Sparkugs of Method. He is, I would consider him the best warlock in the world. And an extremely nice guy. He has his own YouTube channel. I really recommend you subscribe and check out his content for really cutting edge PTR type stuff. The stuff I can't really do anymore, which is trying out this brand new content in the middle of the night. Some of these fights are taking place. This one's around 8:30, but I'm not sure if this is US time. I'm not sure if this is US time, but I know for a lot of the guys in Europe it takes place around 1 AM. I do not miss having to do that. I do not miss having to do that. I do not miss having to wait on the PTR till 1 AM to actually start raiding. It's a horrible experience. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this fight. I would encourage you, in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and do this, because some of you are going to be like, oh my god, Warlocks, mages suck. Shut up, you suck. So, first thing you're going to notice is these globules all over the floor, which is always kind of cool. And Immersus is kind of like this swirly entity in the middle. Now, the first thing I want you guys to notice here, especially if you're in a 10-man guild, is that this actual environment is always subject to change. But right now, this room creates a giant problem. And I mean that in a punish kind of way, because it is far too fucking big. This room is huge for a 10-man group to cover. A few things going on so we can keep an eye out on what's happening. I'll just return us back to here. Is that these pools on the floor are created by players. So when you get in here, don't be afraid that you're being targeted by everything. Hopefully you can see Mr. Sparko will spawn one under his feet in a moment. Go on, do it for me. Oh, he's going to cast Swirl. This is one of his main abilities, is Swirl. Swirl sounds quite dangerous in the Dungeon Journal. Many a time you'll run into this issue where the Dungeon Journal sounds terrifying, creates a swirl of death which will fucking own you and your children and your firstborn and a dog. All this kind of stuff, it really goofs you up. I'm going to move that back because that green box is just annoying, so you can enjoy the DPS meter. This is Swirl. You see these blue things here? Now you'll notice that their animation is actually really faint, which is kind of shitty. We kind of hope Blizz wouldn't do this anymore, which is create these shitty little blue things that are really hard to see and kind of correspond over there. But touching these is a bad idea. You can see they move around randomly, and then you go ahead and you spawn your pool under here. But these are all the minor things. What happens, if we go back, is you actually notice that you kill Immersus. See Immersus there, he's on 4%. Every time we kill Immersus, he's going to disappear and then split his body into pieces like the Sidious. A great addition to this fight is, and a problem, I want to say, an addition which is good and a problem, is that they've included 2 types of globules. So he's going to break into pieces. He's going to flood the room, this giant room, which is really hard to cover as a 10-man. GG. And there's 2 types of pools. One type that can be DPS'd. Another type that can be healed, which is cool, right? Healers tend to have a really shitty time when something needs to die quickly. They're like, oh, well, I can't, nobody takes any damage. So what am I supposed to do? The problem with this is it seems, so far, remember everything on the PTR is subject to change, is that the globules divide evenly. So let's just say he has 100 corruption, which is what we're trying to get rid of. Every globule we kill prevents him from getting a corruption stack. Starts with 100. So let's say that there's 100 globules when he splits. There are less. But 50 of those are DPSable, and 50 of those are healable. Okay, just for an example. The numbers are slightly different. What the big problem is there is we have considerably less healers. And of course, these globules react in certain ways. When they are killed, not only do you, if you stand on their nuts, you have to be really close, you will get a damage buff to help you kill the other globules. Healers will also cause like an explosion when they reach the target. What happens as the fight goes on is the imbalance between adds that can be DPS'd and adds that can be healed will grow more and more if you roll, say, 2 healer. If you roll 2 healer, you're going to have a bit of a problem later in the fight because the healing ones are going to vastly outnumber the amount of DPSable targets. They're going to be greatly diminished and easily killed, where your healing targets, which cause an explosion, are going to be getting more and more and more because you're just healing less, especially if you roll 2 healers. Which I actually thought was kind of cool, just to prevent this kind of cheesing aspect. So I'm going to let this play through, and we can see he splits. There's the message. Immersus splits up. He gets rid of all the pools that you guys created, and here come the globules. You see they're going to land around the room. Now you can see why this is a problem with the size of the room. They're spread very, very thin. I just want you to look at the map over here and see how thin they've spread themselves. Give each other a little mark to try and kill these. But there's no way a fucking 10-man can possibly be covering this. Okay, there's no way a 10-man can possibly covering all this room. So they're going to go ahead and kill these. Now, one thing to bear in mind is they do move kind of quickly, but healing and DPSing them actually cause them to slow down. They cause them to slow, and you can see Cone of Cold in effect there, and we're going to kill these. But what you're going to notice as we move further into the fight, I want to move down to about here, is we're going to start noticing a lot more of the healer ones appearing. You can see this is a healer one. Okay, this is a healer one right there. These light blue ones. These light blue ones are going to start becoming more and more prevalent. And yeah, Shadow Priest, there are certain classes that are kind of going to be more useful than others. But overall, it's not intended to be a more difficult fight than anything else. I would consider it around Jin Rock in difficulty, where you could definitely see the amount of healer ones here and here all sort of getting together. Now, every time these globules reach the target, you might be wondering, how are people dying here? Is that they explode. So every globule that reaches back to Immersus actually causes a large explosion. So healers are going to have to be aware of 2 things there. Okay, so if you're a healer and you're going into the Siege of Orgrimmar and your first boss, you're going to have to be aware of 1, you've got to heal your globules, more the better. But also, when the globules reach the target, people are going to start taking a shitload more damage. Okay, they're going to start getting explosions all over the face. And this becomes a problem later on. As I said, as the healer globules start to become more prevalent, they're going to be causing a lot more explosions because the DPSs can't help. They just can't help. They can't do anything to help with that. And that's why a balanced raid setup is going to be important. So if you're a raid leader, be aware a little bit of balance is going to be in order here in order to prevent this issue, which occurs further down the fight here. Let's see if we let this play out. Every time Immersus does come back, he has health equal to the amount of corruption left. So you can see he's got 34 corruption left from all the globules we've killed. He'll start with 34%. He'll start with 34%. You can see the swirl there. It's no big deal, this swirl. You should not be hit by it. Just be aware you can see it. It's light blue. It's got fucking smoke coming out of it. Easiest thing in the world to see. Now, I think here is where we'll see the prevalence of what we were talking about. So you can see there's a healer one there, another healer one there. You can already see that there are more healer ones spawning already. Mr. Patsy did die, but I believe he lagged out. You can see healers, healers. You can see the vast difference already. How many healer ones are now spawning compared to the DPS ones. So it does appear that they work in a ratio. You can see there's more and more over here. And you can see the damage this is causing every time these healer ones get there. Is they're taking more and more damage and your raid is becoming unstable. I will say they managed to kill it. So it's not a big deal. This fight is actually kind of zergable. There's one of the big scary elements of this, and that is the tanks. He has a big frontal cone. He's going to blow you in the face with all the shadow damage. But as the fight goes on, it becomes pretty obvious that you can actually start DPSing him back to split. You can DPS him back to the split before he even casts a Shadow Breath. So the fight might be one tankable by something like a DK. DK who can really trivialize magical damage. There's a good opportunity that maybe DKs can solo tank this fight in its current state. Because as the fight goes on and on and on, he dies much quicker. He has less opportunity to do a breath. I believe after we come back from this one. Just to show you, as he reforms, you can see he reforms there. And there he is. You can see he's down to 18%. So you're always in execute phase. Warriors are going to be loving this a little bit. Anybody with execute damage, Shadow Priests especially, are going to be loving this. You're going to get lots of opportunity for under 20% damage, which is always nice to see. And it gets gradually easier. You can see Mr. Just Wait there gets the flame, there gets the Shadow Breath, but he's already split. You can see he got the Shadow Breath. There's his Shadow Breath debuff. He got it literally as he split. And he was fine. He was absolutely fine. It was no big deal. But look at all the healer ones now. And this is where your problems are starting. This is where your problems are starting. I will say the heroic mechanics to this look pretty tough. We could just say as a glance around the room. If I can pause it in a nice place. I don't think he's going to look back over there. Mr. Sparko. There's healer ones all over. You can see the amount of damage this is putting on the raid. Look at this. And that is literally because of a healer imbalance. Which is... It's not common to see a healer imbalance actually causing this kind of issue. You wouldn't expect that healer imbalance actually to cause more damage. Not prevent more damage, but actually cause more damage. Which is interesting. As you can see there, we got the Shadow Breath and he went away. And it's fine. And it's fine. So that's your first boss, okay? That's your first boss. He's very, very easy. Let's face facts. Every time you do a phase, he dies quicker. You get back to split. Split doesn't really do a lot of damage until all the globules get there. One big problem you're going to have as a 10-man, unless this room changes, is one, the size of the room. Who can you trust over there? Do you have some derpy caster, some derpy melee who just sucks? Right? That guy is probably going to kill one globule. You don't want that guy with a big area to himself. So your better players, for raid leaders, you're going to be assigning your better players to a larger area, especially those who can do effective multi-dotting. Moonkids are going to be really nice here. Getting their Star Surge procs are really going to allow to fucking turret that shit out. Yeah, a lot of dots, a lot of turrets firing out, all sorts of stuff. Bear in mind, you can buff your damage by standing on top of them, okay? When they die and you stand on top of them, you get a nice buff to damage, and healers get a buff to healing as well. Always worth noting the healers get a buff to healing. But a very simple fight, nothing special, and he dies pretty easily. The main concern for me, for anybody looking forward to raiding this, is maybe roll 3 healers. Damage is of no consequence here, but you end up with this. You can see how much more dangerous this goes as your fight goes on. This becomes so much more dangerous. It really does, because we've got so many healing globules. You can see they're nearly all healing globules by now. At this point, we are dealing almost exclusively with healer globules, and these are just going to blow the fucking raid up. Look what happens. You can see here how many people are dying because of this. Although they do kill him and down he goes. So it does become a problem. If your team is a little bit weaker than Methods, then maybe you're going to have a little problem there if you don't roll 3 healers. Something to bear in mind. I believe that Patsy was supposed to be healing, but he died, unfortunately, lagged out. But that's just one of the problems that you'll run into on the PTR. Okay, let's look at something else. Let's look at let's look at one of the most complicated fights so far on the Siege of Orgrimmar. I'm just going to show you what the dungeon journal looks like for this. We're going to look at the Paragons of Klaxxi. These are the guys that you've been getting your daily quests from. Thank God we get to kill them now, which is fucking awesome. This is the dungeon journal for the Paragons of the Klaxxi. Yeah. Right. Still scrolling. Still fucking scrolling. Alright. That is your dungeon journal for the Paragons of the fucking Klaxxi. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this fight. There's a lot going on in this fight. There's a lot. This is more than we've seen ever, pretty much. More than we've seen ever. So I'm going to take a quick look at the room. As you can see, you're going to be in a circular room again. My raid leader's job, I don't care. Maybe, maybe. Your Paragons are you have to fight all the Paragons, and they're all stood on their pillars up in the air. And the way this fight is going to work is pretty simple. You have to fight all the Paragons of the Klaxxi. They're going to start with 3. Now it tells you which 3 they have a debuff, or a buff, whichever you want to call it, before the fight starts. So you can tell which 3 you're going to get. There's a general rule of thumb that's going to continue throughout the procedure of this fight. One is that each of the Klaxxi puts a debuff on you that prevents you from tanking another specific Klaxxi. Alright? So tanking one of them will prevent you, by giving you some ridiculous damage taken debuff, from tanking another one. So the tanks are going to have to be really, really careful. It's a minimum 2 tank fight, obviously, of who is next. Now what they've done is decided to tell you which 3 you'll start with, and then they will mark, or debuff, or buff, one of the Klaxxis on the pillars to let you know who is next. So the tanks are going to have to work out, 1, which debuff do they have, and does it correspond to the Klaxxi that is coming next. Now obviously because there's lots of Klaxxi, they haven't got a lot of HP, you're going to be nuking them down. Nuking them down very quickly. So we're going to have a quick overview of this one, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. So you can see 3 come down. You go into Mark 1. They currently have 44 million HP, which is absolutely nothing. It's always worth bearing in mind that as you kill one, the others will heal to full. So damage cheesing will happen, but is not welcomed unless it significantly increases your single target DPS. Always worth remembering that. You can see one of the mechanics there where we've got people being entombed in amber. And so on. There's Mr. Corvin the Prime. And every time one of them dies, the damage of the others is buffed by 10%. So every time we fucking kill them, it is buffed by 10%. So there's a lot of choosing going on here between what are we killing, what's next. So you can see Mr. Windreaver just landed. So the only tank that can pick that up is the one without the debuff towards the Windreaver. So you need to be prepared for that. Any of you tanks out there need to be tanking. It's not going to be a difficult job to tank them, obviously. And then going ahead and checking who is next and who is going to tank it and making decisions based on that, such as, well, I can't tank all 3, so take one off me, blah, 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 blah. Working this out is going to be very, very important. You don't want to fuck this up particularly. Warlocks are loving this, and so are they. I did want to point out, some people were concerned about debuffs and stuff. You do get a warning when this mechanic happens. Mr. Windreaver can jump on your balls. Come on, Mr. Windreaver. You see you get the red mark. It doesn't last very long, but you can avoid it. You can avoid it and not take that half HP, which is always very cool. And the fight is pretty basic on these lines, although it's got all those dungeon journal entries. Each boss has some specific element that isn't overly difficult to counter. What you'll find in most encounters is if you have multiple bosses at the same time, the mechanics of each one aren't that bad, because they obviously have to be able to work in tangent with everything else that's going on in the fight. So you're not going to struggle too much with dealing with each individual's mechanics. It's going to get more difficult as the fight goes on, obviously, as they gain more damage and start doing more nasty things. Now, there's a really good element to this that I should tell you about, is that every time one of these Klaxxis is killed, you can gain a buff for one member of your raid. Okay, you can gain a buff for one member of your raid. There are healing debuffs, there are damaging buffs, and there are tanking buffs. And you can pick and choose who gets what. So if you're a good player, you're going to have a really good time on this fight. If you're the derper who gets brought along, you need to play better, because you're going to now miss out on really cool buffs that allow you to do so. Let me read some of these to you. Let me read some of these. Power of the Mr. Here we got. Mr. The Windreaver will give you death with wings. Players of the damage dealer role may acquire this power. Activating this ability causes the caster to leap forward a fixed distance and inflict weapon damage to all enemies within yard. So as you saw that he dived on Sparko there, you can actually get it, that buff, that power yourself, that ability yourself. Let me see if we can find the healer one. This healer one wasn't working in this fight as far as I'm aware. It was bugged. It was vast apothecarial knowledge. We're going to be looking at this guy in a second because he's very dangerous. Players in the healer role may acquire this Paragon power. When the buff is activated, all healing done for the next 10 seconds will leave a volatile putisse on the target for an amount equal to the healing done. The next time the target is damaged, that will release the healing stored on the target. So there's lots of buffs and stuff going on as each of these Paragons die. which is really cool. What I do want to point out is this fight isn't overly messy. You might expect this to be a really messy fight. I certainly did when I heard about it. I thought this fight is going to be crackers. Absolutely crackers. But it does contain essentially every element. So while that's playing, I'm just going to read. We've got mind control going on. Or mesmerize. We've got encasing in ambers. And more importantly, we're going to see it in a second, is this ability here. These hungry kuchongs. How do we say that? Hungry kunchong. Hungry kunchong. It's hard to say that without some sort of racist Asian accent. Which is going to suck players in. So you can see this player is being sucked towards it, and damage needs to be done to it very quickly. The guys did test, as far as I'm aware, whether or not you could predict which one was actually going to mind control people, so you could pre-dot it. That doesn't appear to be possible. It is completely random. It is entirely random. Which is very important for you to know that it is entirely random. So pre-dotting and wasting DPS time isn't going to help. Every time you damage them for 30% of their HP, they will release you. You can see here this grab on effect, doing some damage. Demonology doing work like it should. Then they get big. Then they get big like this. This is when it all goes a little bit pear-shaped. These things hit really fucking hard and cannot be tanked. Cannot be tanked. This looks to be the guy who's going to make or break your raid. So I think we should spend a little bit of time on this guy so you're prepared for it. He's called Zaril the Poison Mind. Is that his name? Yeah, Zaril the Poison Mind. Zaril the Poison Mind gives you a debuff. Whoop. You see this debuff here. Okay. This debuff here. Oh, them hungry kuchongs, by the way, or kunchongs. So if you go too close to them, you're instantly dead. There's no way to ignore it. You are instantly dead. That is it. Try and think of it if you ever did Nefarian. Nefarian Heroic, then Mind Control. So this debuff here. Now, this guy has a choice of 7 toxins to put on you. 7. This is going to be your raid wiper. This is going to fuck your shit up, okay? He's got red, blue, yellow, purple, orange, and green. Oh, it's 6, isn't it? Does it say 6? I thought it said 7. Each of these does nasty, nasty business, and we're going to see this fight doesn't last very much longer once this guy gets into the fight, doing the job, and trying to significantly work on those. He's going to go ahead and start just wiping people out. You can see he manages to avoid that air. Totally avoidable, that Mr. Windreaver there. He is very, very much avoidable. Cool people will avoid that. Suckers will not. And they're trying to kill Kaztek the Mesmerizer, and this is one of those fights which I love. I love these kind of fights because we can make a decision. Do we really need to kill the guy who's already out, or should we nuke the guy who just landed, who's more dangerous? It's all up to you. You can put up with whatever combo you want, and we can have a lot of combinations of Klaxxi up at the same time. There's going to be certainly easier and harder combos. That's going to happen. Perhaps having the Kunchong add up is actually going to cause major problems. But also at the same time, do we really want the poison guy up? And what are we going to do about the other guy? The other guy's really easy. Let's get rid of this guy. Lots of choices to be made very, very quickly. And as a raid leader, you're going to need to know what your combos are good at. And what combos are really dangerous. If try and think of it like, what's his name? In the Dragon Soul with the globules. You know the guy. Who's the guy with the globules? You fucking crawl in and they do that kind of shit. Yosage? Yosage, you sleeping? I want to say Yosage. Yeah, Yosage. So Yosage, when the colours appeared, you were like, oh, we need to deal with this now. Okay, that's the danger. Analysing and assessing the danger is what's going to make or break your raid on this fight. This is a much later fight into the dungeon. I believe this is boss number. This is the last boss before Mr. Garrosh. This is the last boss before Garrosh. So this is going to be a little bit more difficult. When I was first, look at Zifika representing. This fight is going to be very much about analysing what dangers you pose right now and which one is the most dangerous to deal with. From what I can see so far, the Poison Mind does this pretty regularly. That ain't cool. His debuffs, you have 6 different colours to deal with, and each 6 fucking works differently. So it's just an example, like the red one explodes to all players within 10 yards for like 400,000. The blue one explodes for 600 frost damage divided amongst players. So you're going to have to learn this, okay? So, oh, we have red toxin spread out. Blue toxin, we need to be gathered up, otherwise this kind of shit happens. What we don't want is the blue toxin. By paying attention to this, you need to know what they do. Yellow toxin is going to make nasty clouds. But as you can see, by not picking up that we needed to gather up because of the blue toxin, is this actually leads to very significant deaths quite quickly. While we're working on the manipulator, who maybe isn't anywhere near as dangerous as that guy. Nowhere near as dangerous. And then we marked what we were doing, or what the group is doing here, is killing them in order. Okay? They're going to be doing it in order. Whereas maybe, hey, we need to get rid of the poison mine because he's literally ganking us. He's ganking our balls off. Is where you're going to make or break this raid. I would really love to see, you know, just raid leaders remembering this stuff. It does mean raid leaders have so much to think about that it's going to be a big problem for those guys. I don't want you to be overburdened or feel like it's a burden. Remembering what each boss does is going to come with time. It's going to come with time. But you can see this blue toxin's killing the tank. Almost killed these. You can see how quickly this blue toxin, when not dealt with properly, actually just wipes people out. So far, you could say, looking at that, guys, it's going to be a case of he's the most dangerous. His poison mine's down, let's get rid of him. Heroic is going to be a fucking nightmare for this boss. I can't imagine. I was looking through some of the heroic abilities. Not too good. Not too good. Not too good at all. But which one are you saving Bloodlust for? Also big decisions. Alright? Also big decisions. You're unlikely to want to Bloodlust at the beginning. It's one of those fights. We don't really want to Bloodlust at the start of the fight because that's the easiest part of the fight. Sure, we'll clear one guy out quickly, but God knows when this guy will come down. God knows when this guy will come down. We need our Bloodlust to get rid of him quickly, therefore securing us the kill, because our future combos are going to be much, much easier. Okay? The good thing is that people don't need to go, oh, it's him, and be surprised, because the game will tell you who is next. Okay, we're going to Bloodlust when he lands. Always nice to be able to say things like that. We're going to Bloodlust when the next guy lands. Okay? Always nice to do that, which is very, very cool. Okay, our last boss we're going to look at today is, in fact, the new Mimiron, is what he's been dubbed as. I don't think he looks quite up to Mimiron standards. I think he actually looks a little bit like a wannabe Mimiron. He's like, because he's engineering based, which is kind of okay, I guess. But this boss looks like it's going to be difficult. I'm trying to focus on the bosses that you're going to be more interested in rather than anything else. So we're going to look at Mr. Siegecrafter Blackfuse. Siegecrafter Blackfuse. I'm going to let this play for a second so you can kind of get the idea of how much chaos this fight is going to cause you. And if you're in a 10-man who's really struggling with position and stuff, it's time to get a little bit of practice in with your positioning and raid awareness. This fight looks to be entirely 90% raid awareness is going to get you this kill. There are still problems with this fight. I read the PTR notes, that was the feedback from all the various guilds. There are things like hitboxes. I just want you to be aware as well. We're going to be talking about in a minute when I kind of go over the mechanics of this fight. Is this over here? If I can get it into the shot, it makes a brief appearance, ever so brief. Ever so brief. This here, this conveyor belt, that's going to be a significant part of the fight. You can see there is a chap over there on the conveyor belt doing his business. So we'll get back to that. Now, this is a very, very short video. No guilds, as far as I know, got anywhere near killing this guy. Anywhere near killing this guy. We can ignore the damage numbers. Remember, they're pre-made gear, and so on and so forth. So don't take too much away. Classes are also still being balanced. So notice an ad, Mr. Automated Shredder. Notice these saw blades kicking people all over the place. Saw blades never fun. So notice these saw blades that are filling up the area. Also notice these mines. You see that are fixated. These mines are fixated on people. You can see these mines are fixated currently on Sparko. You can see people are dying already. Notice how many fucking saw blades are falling up. All good, all good. And then it's going to end in disaster very, very shortly. Very, very shortly. So we're looking at a fucking shitstorm of stuff. Absolute fucking cake shitstorm of things going on. And then you can see quickly people are getting stuck around. Notice this suction. Throwing saw blades at you. Saw blades knocking you down. This is going to be a nightmare. Especially for the healers. There's a lot going on here for healers. While there's also a lot of other stuff going on. And you can see these things are dragging onto people. Which is all good. So it's a fucking... This is going to be a... Really? Oh dear. This is going to be a really difficult fight for anybody. This is going to be the big one. This is going to be make or break. Now, this could be nerfed pretty heavily. This one could be fucking really, really nerfed. But it looks crazy and messy. It looks crazy and messy. It looks like one of those fights that people are going to really struggle with who aren't used to looking after themselves. Healers are really going to have a tough time with this one. A really, really tough time with this one. Yeah, so we're going to go through what's going on so you can kind of be prepared for this fight. This is one of those fights that you should know about in advance in order to prepare for it. You just want to prepare for it. That's all you want to do. You want to prepare for it in your mind. What kind of people do you want there? What kind of things do we need to work on? What does my raid suck balls at? What does my raid fucking suck at, right? Does my raid suck at environmental awareness, or are they pretty good at it? Is there people in my raid who suck at this fight, and I need to know about what's going on? So let's go crack on with what the fuck is going on with this guy. Alright, so he's pretty straight up. He's going to put debuffs and stuff on you. Now, this is going to be a little bit like the Firebird in Firelands. For Alice Razor, in terms of he's actually going to give the tanks a buff which does significant amounts of damage to the adds. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit down to the tanks to do damage here, which is kind of cool. They get a damage buff by 1000%. The tanks will get a debuff, in which case they are able to tank the adds and do 1000% more damage to that add. This automated shredder. This automated shredder is going to take 1000% more damage, which is fucking cool as shit, because tanks love blowing things up. Really love fucking blowing things up, and we like to see tanks doing 1000% more damage. No doubt we'll see some cool swaggy guys doing all sorts of crazy damage, which would be fucking funny. These blades are going to fill the room, but they do get sucked back at an electric magnet, which we saw further on. So it's just going to be a case of being aware and getting the hell out of there. The problem is these mines, okay? So you're going to have most of your raid positioned to this side of the platform. This side of the platform is where you're going to want to be, because these mines are going to be bringing you over here, and then the electromagnet is going to suck you back over there, getting a combination of saw blade and mines and potentially electromagnets all at the same time, sucking you through. You're going to get knocked off. Big danger of people getting knocked over there. Big danger of being knocked over there. In terms of the ad control, it's worth noting that the boss himself has auto repair. And he repairs these automated shredders himself. So wasting DPS on the ads is a big fucking waste of DPS. You're not going to want to do that. Another thing that I noticed from the stream is, as of right now, these crawler mines do not detonate unless they are fixed on you. Always worth knowing that, especially if you're very melee heavy, is you might not want the melee on the mines. Naturally, you don't want the melee going towards the mines, right? Because it's a DPS loss. But the answer to that is that, in fact, they can, because they won't detonate unless they reach their person they're after. It's based on Valiona from Grimbatol. The Valiona fight from Grimbatol. The fire elementals that spawn, they fixate on one person. Anybody can do whatever they want to them as long as they don't reach their fixated person. So just think of it like that. Okay? Think of it along those lines. Is that it's just like that fight, and you'll be fine. I'm sure people can relate to that fight. Whoever played in Kata will understand what I'm talking about there. Being spread out is going to be a big fucking problem here. Being spread out, and you can see that the tanks go ahead on these ads and start doing crazy damage. You can see that Trekkie's doing like 200,000 DPS, all that kind of stuff, and he's just flying up the damage meter. I want you to notice that as he's doing all this extra damage towards that ad, doing tons of it. The other bit that we can't see is this bit over here, which is a cool mechanic, actually. I kind of want to tell you about this mechanic because I think it's pretty cool. It's called the assembly line. And what you're going to have here is parts of weapons. Periodically, Blackfuse will initiate fabrication of a set of weapons on the assembly line in his workshop. Disassembled weapons are brought in via conveyor belts along the northwest side of his room. They then pass through an assembly machine in the northeast wall of the room. They emerge completed on conveyor belts along the southeast of his room, where they attack players. Players can use transport pipes to reach the belt along the wall, where they can attack and destroy the disassembled weapons. After players destroy a weapon, the remaining weapons become shielded and cannot be damaged. Now, what does that mean? We can decide what the weapons are that attack us. We can pick and choose. We can say, if there's a turret and a laser beam and a health drain and something like that, we can decide which of these we want to deal with. Okay? So we can pick which part we don't want. We can decide we don't want that. We don't want this individual part to be a factor in this fight. We can kill that and leave the rest of the weapon which you can deal with and handle. A nice, again, choice element. a choice element of what we want in the fight. We can pick a little bit and have our own decision on what elements are better. There might be, to give you an example of why this is good, if your raid is melee heavy, there might be a specific weapon type that is actually really deadly towards melee, but friendlier towards casters. As such, we don't want that one. But again, on the flip side, if we only have a couple of casters and a lot of melee, or blah, 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 we want the one that's unfriendly to casters, which is friendly to melee. These kind of decisions. So I'm hoping to see some correlation between that and make the fight designed around how your raid works, which is kind of what I think the raiding needs to do, is that we can be a little bit creative and actually tailor the fight to what is best for our raid comp. Instead of the raid comp being determined by the fight, we can actually just switch that shit around and decide what is best for our raid comp. Oh, well, raid 1 uses this. Well, that's not great for us. Raid 2 for this. We want this setup for this fight, and that setup for that fight. So far, Siege of Orgrimmar seems to be interesting, if not plain looking. Siege of Orgrimmar is full of mechanics. Loaded to the fucking teeth with mechanics. It's loaded with things that are interesting. It's loaded with very clever fights. So far, no real negative feedback about any of the bosses that have been tested. Nothing really going, oh, this fight sucks, this fight's boring. That hasn't happened yet. The raid itself, not looking too clever in terms of its design and grandeur and scale. I would say it doesn't look that appealing. In fact, when I asked you on the daily last week, it's not looking that great, right? This raid doesn't look amazing, doesn't look interesting. I would kind of agree with that, but it is Orgrimmar. They kind of have to work with what they have. But the fights themselves look very compelling. Really, really compelling. And I hope that helps you prepare for what seems to be, it could change. If I find out anything more, we'll look at it next week. These seem to be the most interesting and sort of complex fights. But I hope they're not appearing too complex now. They're not. The basics, Klaxxi, you just have to make sure your tanks are on the case and pick which one's the most deadly. With Siegebreaker, we don't really know enough about him yet. But it's interesting. There's a lot of diversity available with picking and choosing your weapons, who's doing what, tanks able to do damage, and real environmental awareness fights. And a little bit of a balance issue on your first boss. The reason I wanted to bring the first boss up is I don't want lots of you going in with your raid like, we're really strong, maybe we should just 1 or 2 heal the first fight or do something silly like that and run into problems that are derived from having that kind of raid setup. It would appear that 3 healers seems to be the way to go. Or 2 healers and somebody you can interchange, which is the usual 10-man setup, something along those lines. But first boss, Immersus, does appear on the face of it to benefit having a more spread raid setup, where the rest of the fight seems a little bit more creative in terms of what you want to do, which is pretty cool. The daily's at 5 PM. The daily's at 5 PM. Okay, that's not going to be the end of today's workshop. I hope you enjoyed a look at Siege of Orgrimmar. I hope you're excited for it. I'm excited to see these bosses in action properly, and I'm especially excited to see how the heroic mechanics go, because some of them, especially Immersus, actually seem to be really difficult. Immersus does not seem to be a pushover whatsoever, which is pretty cool, which is pretty good. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to see you tomorrow for the daily, where we're going to go over all the emails you guys have been sending about Resto Shaman. You guys have been going crazy about the Resto Shaman, sending me all sorts of crazy nonsense. I won't be streaming Brutal Legend. I'm going to take Ben out. As I was streaming today, I did not get to take Ben out, so I kind of need to go and take my Ben out, which is pretty cool. 40-man Siege of Orgrimmar? Maybe, maybe. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right, 5 PM. Be good.